Today our topic will be exploration. In 1400, no one could have guessed how much Europe was about to change. Back then Europe was not a big player in world trade. Europeans wanted many things from other places, but they did not have much to offer in return. So why did Europeans and not other nations start exploring new lands? Let's talk about that before we get into Columbus's journey. China was a powerful country in the 15th century. It had a strong government and about 100 million people, much more than all the European countries combined. The Chinese invented many important things like the compass, gunpowder, and early printing and paper money. People from other countries wanted Chinese goods like silk and tea, but they did not have much to trade back. Most of what Europeans knew about China came from a book called The Travels of Marco Polo. Marco Polo was a merchant from Venice who traveled to China with his father and uncle when he was 17. They reached China in 1271 and Marco Polo stayed there for 20 years, working for the Emperor Kublai Khan. China did try exploring for a while. Between 1405 and 1434, a royal eunuch named Chen Ho, also known as Chen He, led 6 large fleets on voyages to the East Indies and the coast of East Africa. His biggest ships were huge, much larger than the ones Columbus used. Here you can see the comparison between two ships. The larger one was used by Chen Ho and the smaller one was used by Christopher Columbus. You can see the difference, how big the ship was that was used by Chen Ho. Chen Ho brought back many interesting things like giraffe, zebras, which amazed people in China. One can only imagine the scene when Chen Ho's massive fleet arrived on the coast of East Africa, bringing back exotic animals like giraffes and zebras to China, creatures that amazed the Chinese elite. These expeditions showed the potential for China to lead in global exploration. However, after Chen Ho's death, China decided to halt these voyages. The Chinese government believed that other cultures had little to offer their celestial kingdom. They banned the construction of large ocean-going ships and forbade anyone from owning a vessel with more than 2 masts. This inward turn meant that China, with its self-contained economic and political system, chose to focus on internal affairs rather than overseas expansion. Now let's move on to another important power during that period. That's India. In the late 14th century, India was ruled by the Delhi Sultanate, a significant empire at the time. However, this period saw a lot of power transitions and court rivalries that hindered Indian merchants from traveling the world for exploration. For instance, the assassination of Sultan Firuz Shah Tughlaq in 1388 led to a series of weak rulers and internal conflicts. This political instability made it difficult for India to focus on exploring new territories or establishing overseas trade routes. Despite these internal challenges, India maintained trading relationships, especially with the Ottoman Empire. Indian merchants were known to trade spices, textiles, and other goods with Ottomans, who then distributed these items throughout Europe. However, the ongoing political rivalry and weak administration in the Indian subcontinent restricted India's ability to play a significant role in global exploration. Much like China, India was a self-sustaining economy. With its vast landmass and abundant resources like gold, coal, and other minerals, India did not need to import many goods from foreign countries. For example, India's fertile lands allowed it to produce staple crops like rice and wheat, which sustained its large population. Additionally, the demand for Indian goods in European markets was exceptionally high. European merchants highly valued Indian silk, spices, and cotton, which were often traded at significant profits. This self-sufficiency meant that India, like China, did not feel the same pressure to explore new lands or establish new trade routes. During the 14th century, these two major powers contributed to about 50% of the world's GDP. Despite their economic strength, they remained passive in the global exploration due to their self-sustaining economies. Consider the story of the Vijayanagar Empire in southern part of India, which thrived during the same period. The empire was known for its wealth and grandeur, with bustling markets full of precious stones, spices and silks. Now let's discuss why it became very important for Europeans to explore new lands. Unlike India and China, Europe was fragmented into many small and competing nations. This competition drove innovation and exploration. Europeans had a strong desire for luxury goods like spices, silk and other exotic items from the East, but they faced significant barriers in obtaining these quality goods. The overland trade routes to Asia were long, dangerous and controlled by intermediaries like the Ottoman Empire. This often resulted in high prices and limited availability of Eastern goods. As a result, Europeans were motivated to find new direct routes to the sources of these goods. Now we will talk about the situation in Europe. The socio-economic and political atmosphere of Europe during the 14th, 15th and 16th centuries was fraught with challenges, which ultimately spurred the age of exploration. First, let's talk about the Black Death. This devastating plague ravaged Europe in the mid-14th century, wiping out about 1/3 of the population. Imagine the impact of losing such a significant portion of the population. Labor shortages, economic disruption, and profound social upheaval. The survivors faced a changed world where labor was suddenly in high demand, and the traditional feudal system began to break down. Adding to these internal challenges was the growing influence of the Ottoman Empire. By the mid-15th century, the Ottomans had become a formidable power, controlling crucial land routes that connected Europe to Asia. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 was a pivotal moment. With Ottomans dominating the overland trade routes, European merchants found it increasingly difficult to access the lucrative markets of Asia directly. This bottleneck forced Europeans to seek alternative routes to obtain the spices, silks, and other valuable goods that were highly sought after in Europe. We also need to consider the legacy of the Crusades in shaping European ambitions. During the Crusades, European knights established the Kingdom of Jerusalem, which they held for over a century before it was retaken in 1244. To make the region profitable, the Crusaders developed sugar plantations using a mix of free and slave labor. After being driven from the Holy Land, these Crusaders retreated to Mediterranean islands such as Cyprus, Malta, Crete, and Rhodes. There, they continued to cultivate sugar and other crops using slave labor. This early plantation economy, which relied heavily on slave labor, set a precedent for future European colonial ventures. The economic model developed by these early Crusader planters, using colonies to produce staple crops for European market through slave labor, became a blueprint for later colonial enterprises. Initially, the slaves were Muslim captives, but by the 14th and 15th centuries, planters turned to pagan Slavs from the Black Sea area and the Adriatic, giving rise to the term slave. This context is crucial for understanding why Europeans, unlike their Indian and Chinese counterparts, felt compelled to explore and colonize new lands. The Black Death, the pressure from Ottoman Empire, and the legacy of the Crusades created a unique set of circumstances that drove Europeans to the seas. They were searching not only for new trade routes, but also for new lands to exploit, using the economic models they had developed over centuries. So as we delve into Columbus's journey and the broader age of exploration, keep in mind these broader historical forces. The combination of internal socio-economic pressures and external political challenges pushed Europe towards a path of maritime exploration and eventual global dominance. This period of exploration was not just about discovering new lands, but also about finding new ways to sustain and expand European economies in the face of significant challenges. Here we will discuss the role of Portugal in leading the global exploration. In the year 1400, it was almost unthinkable that Europe was on the brink of a dramatic expansion. Portugal, a small kingdom with fewer than 1 million people, seemed an unlikely leader. It had been unified for less than a century, and Lisbon, its only significant city, had a population of just 40,000. When we compare Portugal to the Italian city-states, France and England, which boasted more developed maritime traditions and larger merchant classes, Portugal's position appeared modest at best. Yet, Portugal had some notable advantages that set the stage for its future success. First and foremost, Portugal enjoyed a period of internal peace and stability, unlike its neighboring countries. During this time, England was embroiled in the War of Roses, and France was recovering from the 100 Years' War. Portugal's internal tranquility allowed it to focus on maritime ventures without the distraction of political upheaval. Portugal's strategic location at the crossroads of the Mediterranean and Atlantic worlds played a crucial role in its maritime ambitions. The Portuguese mariners, observing the vast and largely uncharted Atlantic Ocean, began to envision how they could transform it from a daunting barrier into a vital highway for trade and exploration. Their initial goal was not to find a direct sea route to Asia, but to explore immediate opportunities for profit. Consider this. Portuguese explorers were aware of the trade networks that brought gold, slaves, and ivory from Black Africa to Europe. These goods were transported by Arab caravans crossing the Sahara Desert. The Portuguese saw an opportunity to bypass these Arab intermediaries by discovering an Atlantic route to coastal points south of Sahara. They believed that by doing so, they could cut out the middleman and reap substantial profits from these lucrative trades. However, the Portuguese faced a significant challenge, Cape Bohador, located on the West African coast. This cape was infamous for its treacherous shallows, formidable waves, and strong northerly winds. Imagine the trepidation of early navigators facing these formidable conditions. Several brave captains had attempted to sail around Cape Bohador, but none had succeeded in returning. The Cape's reputation was so fearsome that it became a symbol of the dangers of exploration. By early 15th century, Portugal seemed an unlikely candidate to dominate global exploration. The kingdom was relatively small, with Lisbon as its only significant city. However, Prince Henry's strategic vision and investment in maritime ventures were instrumental in transforming Portugal into a major exploratory power. Prince Henry, who became the head of the Order of Christ in 1420, used the order's revenues to sponsor a series of voyages along the West African coast. This initiative was driven by more than just a quest for new lands. It was also fueled by the desire to bypass the dominant Arab trade routes that controlled the flow of valuable goods like gold, ivory, and slaves from Africa to Europe. By seeking an alternative maritime route, Portugal aimed to secure these commodities directly and profit from them. Portugal's efforts were not solely about exploration, but also about overcoming significant geographical and technological challenges. One of the major hurdles was Cape Bohador, which had long been considered impassable due to its treacherous conditions. Successfully navigating around this cape was a pivotal achievement, as it allowed Portuguese explorers to venture further along the African coast. This breakthrough was a direct result of the technological advancements and strategic planning that characterized Portuguese exploration. In the 15th century, Portugal excelled in two critical areas: navigation and naval warfare. Portuguese navigators made groundbreaking strides in mapping the winds and currents of the Atlantic Ocean. This was no small feat. Understanding the complexities of oceanic navigation required detailed observations and the integration of knowledge from various sources. Portuguese sailors meticulously charted the prevailing winds and ocean currents, which were crucial for planning long-distance voyages and establishing reliable sea routes. An important aspect of Portuguese success was their development of the caravel, a ship that revolutionized maritime exploration. The caravel was designed with a greater length-to-beam ratio, which improved its stability and speed. The integration of the lateen sail, that was a triangular sail adopted from Arab designs with traditional square rigging, enhanced the vessel's maneuverability and ability to sail against the wind. This innovative ship design allowed Portuguese explorers to venture further into the open sea, navigating the unpredictable waters of the Atlantic and Indian Oceans with greater ease. The Portuguese also pioneered advancement in naval combat. Before the widespread use of cannon, naval battles often involved grappling and boarding enemy ships. Portuguese ships equipped with heavy artillery could engage opponents from a distance, providing a significant tactical advantage. This innovation allowed the Portuguese to assert their dominance over rival fleets and control key maritime routes. The Portuguese exploration also had economic motivations. Along the African coast, Portuguese explorers discovered valuable resources such as gold, ivory, and slaves. These discoveries were not just fortunate finds, but were strategically leveraged to fund further explorations and expand Portuguese influence. Establishing offshore colonies, particularly on the islands like Sao Tome, became central to their economic strategy. On these plantations, they grew crops such as sugar, which became a significant part of their trade network. Initially, the Portuguese acquired slaves through raids on coastal villages, but this approach led to conflicts with local communities and disrupted trade. By the mid-15th century, they shifted to establishing trading posts or factories along the coast and on offshore islands. These posts became crucial hubs for trading goods and acquiring slaves, facilitating continued exploration and economic expansion. The Portuguese efforts culminated in the quest of a direct sea route to Asia. In 1487, Bartholomew Diaz reached the Cape of Good Hope but faced a mutiny among his crew in the stormy waters, forcing him to turn back. This expedition, however, paved the way for Vasco da Gama's historic voyage in 1498. Da Gama successfully navigated around the Cape and reached the Malabar coast in India, establishing a direct maritime route to Asia. This achievement marked a significant milestone in global exploration, securing Portugal's position as a dominant maritime power and opening up new trade opportunities. In summary, the Portuguese royal family's strategic investment in exploration, coupled with their technological innovations and advancement in naval warfare, enabled Portugal to lead in maritime exploration during the 15th century. By overcoming geographical barriers, developing advanced ship designs, and establishing profitable trade networks, Portugal laid the groundwork for an era of global interaction and expansion. The achievements of figures like Prince Henry the Navigator and Vasco da Gama were instrumental in shaping the course of world history. While Portugal was making impressive strides eastward with its maritime explorations, Spain's effort to expand westward were more measured and gradual. Despite their slow start, the Spanish efforts were crucial in shaping the future of European expansion. During much of 15th century, the Iberian kingdoms of Aragon and Castile were occupied with internal and external conflicts. They were often at war with each other or dealing with internal issues, which slowed their progress in overseas expansion. However, a significant change occurred in 1469 when Prince Ferdinand of Aragon married Princess Isabella of Castile. This marriage united the two kingdoms into what we now recognize as modern Spain, creating a more powerful and unified state with a population of around 4.9 million by 1500. The year 1492 was particularly pivotal for Spain. Isabella and Ferdinand completed the Reconquista by capturing Granada, the last Muslim stronghold on the Iberian Peninsula. This achievement marked the end of Islamic rule in Spain and set the stage for Spain's expansion into new territories. During this period, the port city of Seville became a major center for maritime activities. Many Genoese merchants and shipbuilders were active in Seville, including Christopher Columbus. Columbus, who had extensive maritime experience, proposed a bold plan to reach Asia by sailing west across the Atlantic Ocean. He believed that this westward route would offer a quicker path to the rich markets of Asia. In 1492, after significant negotiation, Columbus secured funding from Isabella and Ferdinand. His expedition was aimed at finding a new trade route, but instead he reached the Caribbean. Although Columbus did not find the route to Asia that he was looking for, his voyages opened up new possibilities for European exploration and colonization. The Spanish monarchy's decision to support Columbus was driven by a desire to compete with Portugal's maritime dominance and to find new trade routes and opportunities. Columbus's voyages were instrumental in establishing Spain's claim in the New World, which eventually became a significant part of Spanish Empire. In summary, Spain's westward expansion, though initially slower than Portugal's eastern ventures, became highly significant. The unification of Ferdinand and Isabella and their support of Columbus's westward voyage marked the beginning of Spain's role as a major global power. Columbus's discoveries, while not achieving his original goal, played a crucial role in opening up the Americas to European exploration and colonization. As we explore the voyages of Christopher Columbus, it's essential to understand the broader historical and geopolitical context that shaped his discoveries and their impact. Columbus, an Italian sailor from Genoa, was driven by a mix of ambition and religious zeal. The son of a weaver and wool merchant, Columbus honed his maritime skills across the Mediterranean and Atlantic, traveling as far as Elmina on the Gold Coast and potentially Iceland. His belief that Japan was merely 2,400 nautical miles west of Spain's Canary Islands was a significant overestimation. Japan was actually about 10,600 nautical miles away. This highlights how little was known about the vastness of the Atlantic Ocean at that time. Columbus's quest for sponsorship was motivated by both personal and ideological goals. His persistence paid off when King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain agreed to support his voyage in 1492. Isabella, having recently completed the Reconquista with the capture of Granada, was eager to extend Spanish influence and spread Christianity. She granted Columbus 3 ships and appointed him Admiral of the Ocean Sea, as well as Governor and Viceroy of any lands he might claim. Isabella's support was not only about expanding religious influence, but also about securing potential economic gains, though she demanded 90% of the voyage's profits. Upon reaching the Caribbean, Columbus encountered the Tainos, indigenous people who did not match the Asian characteristics he had anticipated. Columbus saw them as potential converts and sources of wealth, particularly gold. His relentless pursuit of gold led him to kidnap Tainos to learn Spanish and even attempt to sell them in Spain. Although he failed to find a direct route to Asia, Columbus's discovery of valuable resources in the Caribbean led him to consider colonization as a more viable means of generating wealth. Columbus's return to Spain in 1493 was met with enthusiasm from Ferdinand and Isabella, who sent him back with a much larger fleet of 17 ships and 1,200 men. Despite his initial successes, Columbus's administrative shortcomings and fixation on religious goals, such as finding the Garden of Eden, led to conflicts and a loss of favor with the Spanish crown. Now let's talk about the Treaty of Tordesillas. The diplomatic landscape was significantly altered by the Treaty of Tordesillas signed in 1494. This treaty was a critical response to the emerging tensions between Spain and Portugal over their newly discovered lands. The Treaty of Tordesillas established an imaginary line in the Atlantic Ocean roughly 1,100 miles west of the Canary Islands. According to the treaty, all lands west of this line were to belong to Spain, while those to the east were allocated to Portugal. The Treaty of Tordesillas was designed to prevent conflict between the two maritime powers by clearly demarcating their respective spheres of influence. This division was crucial for managing their competing claims and avoiding disputes over newly discovered territories. The treaty exemplifies the European powers' attempts to regulate exploration and colonization through diplomatic agreements. However, the treaty's division had unintended consequences. The line of demarcation crossed through what is now eastern Brazil, an area that Portugal subsequently claimed when a Portuguese ship arrived there. This resulted in Brazil becoming a Portuguese colony, demonstrating how the treaty inadvertently shaped the map of the New World. The impact of the Treaty of Tordesillas was far-reaching. It allowed Spain and Portugal to focus on their respective colonial ambitions without the constant threat of conflict between them. This agreement significantly influenced the patterns of exploration and colonization, shaping the geopolitical landscape of the New World. The division of the globe set the stage for future European colonial endeavors and had lasting effects on global history. As the 15th century progressed, the Portuguese refined their maritime technology and strategies. They excelled in navigating the high seas and defeating non-European fleets, thanks in part to their advancement in shipbuilding and weaponry. The Portuguese developed the caravel, as I mentioned before, a highly efficient ocean-going vessel, and mounted heavy cannons on their ships, giving them a significant naval advantage. Spanish exploration continued with figures like Juan Ponce de Leon, who ventured into Florida in search of the legendary Fountain of Youth. His quest reflects the era's fascination with mythical treasures and the broader European desire to discover new and valuable resources. As we delve into the age of exploration, we encounter two of the most influential figures in European expansion into the Americas, Hernan Cortés and Francisco Pizarro. In 1519, Hernan Cortés, a Spanish adventurer with dreams of glory and riches, set out from Spain with a modest force. His journey was not just about exploration, but also about fulfilling lucrative promise of the New World. Imagine the excitement and trepidation of Cortés's men as they approached the shores of what is now Mexico, a land that was rumored to be overflowing with gold. Cortés and his 1,500 soldiers, along with an entourage of horses, war dogs, and artillery, made a landfall on the coast of Mexico. They were greeted by the grandeur of Tenochtitlan, the capital of Aztec Empire, a city built on an island in the middle of a lake. The Aztecs, led by the Emperor Montezuma II, were initially intrigued and somewhat awed by these exotic newcomers. However, the initial hospitality quickly turned to tension. Cortés, adept at playing political games, took Montezuma hostage and tried to manipulate him into submission. Yet the situation deteriorated as the Aztecs enraged by the perceived betrayal and the increasing demands from the Spaniards, rebelled. Cortes's return to Tenochtitlan, however, was marked by meticulous planning. The Spanish had learned from their previous mistakes and formed crucial alliances with local enemies of the Aztecs. They besieged the city, cutting off supplies and engaging in fierce combat. The Spanish advantage in technology, including steel weapons, armor, and horses, played a crucial role in their eventual victory. The fall of Tenochtitlan in 1521 was not just a military triumph, but also a symbolic one. The conquest marked the end of one of the most sophisticated civilizations in the Americas and set the stage for Spanish dominance in the region. The city was razed, and on its ruins, the Spanish built Mexico City, which became the center of their colonial empire. Fast forward to 1532, Francisco Pizarro, another ambitious conquistador, embarked on his own campaign in South America. Unlike Cortes, Pizarro's expedition was relatively small, with only about 180 men. Yet, he faced a challenge of even greater complexity: the Inca Empire, a vast and wealthy realm in the Andes Mountains. The Incas were in the midst of a civil war when Pizarro arrived. Pizarro exploited this internal strife to his advantage, capturing the ruler of the Inca civilization in a surprise attack. The Inca ruler was initially taken hostage and offered a room filled with gold and silver as ransom. Despite this immense wealth, Pizarro executed the ruler in 1533, a decision that sealed the fate of the Inca Empire. The fall of Cuzco, the Inca capital, was swift. Pizarro's men, equipped with superior weaponry and military tactics, overwhelmed the Inca forces. By 1533, the Inca Empire was under Spanish control, and the riches of the South America began flowing into Spain. The Spanish melted down Inca gold and silver artifacts, which were considered sacred, to extract their value. The conquests of Cortes and Pizarro were transformative not just in their immediate outcomes, but also in their broader impact. Cortes's and Pizarro's military campaigns demonstrate the effectiveness of European technologies and strategies in overcoming indigenous empires. The Spanish used advanced weaponry, strategic alliances, and psychological tactics to achieve their goals. Moreover, the influx of gold and silver from Americas drastically altered the global economic landscape. Spain's wealth allowed it to assert dominance in European politics, influencing global trade patterns and geopolitical dynamics. The brutal reality of this conquest also sheds light on the darker aspects of European expansion. The destruction of native civilizations and the imposition of Spanish rule had lasting and devastating effects on the indigenous population of the Americas. The Spanish approach to colonization involved not only military conquest, but also exploitation and cultural imposition. Hernan Cortes and Francisco Pizarro were pivotal figures in the history of European expansion. Their conquests reshaped the Americas and had enduring consequences for global history, highlighting the complex interplay of ambition, technology, and the impact of imperialism. Now let's move on to a completely different aspect of European exploration. You have to put yourself in the shoes of those early Europeans. They found gold and achieved glory by capturing the New World, but they were completely at a loss when it came to interpreting the unique cultures of the Inca and Aztec civilizations. They had no idea how to justify the existence of these advanced societies, nor did they know how to treat them. Imagine arriving in a land with people whose way of life was entirely different from anything you had ever known, while being guided by your strong Christian beliefs. Europeans turned to the Bible for guidance, but couldn't find clear answers about these new realities. This led to a wide range of interpretations about these civilizations, often twisted to justify their actions. On one hand, some Europeans saw the natives as noble savages living in a state of purity that had been lost in Europe. This idea made them think that they were bringing progress and civilization. On the other hand, many viewed the natives as heathens, desperately needing conversion to Christianity. This religious perspective often led to the justification of conquest and exploitation as a divine mission. For example, the Spanish justified their harsh treatment of the Aztec and Incas by claiming it as a duty to bring them into Christian fold. This clash of perspectives resulted in very different behaviors towards the indigenous people. The Spanish established the encomienda system, where natives were forced to work on plantations and in mines under brutal conditions. Yet, there were also voices like Bartolomé de la Casa, a Spanish friar who argued passionately for the rights and humane treatment of the natives, even writing a book titled A Short Account of the Destruction of the Indies to expose the mistreatment. The conflicting views and justifications significantly shaped the Europeans' approach to the New World and had lasting impacts on the native populations. This complex and often tragic interaction is crucial to understanding the broader narrative of European colonization and its profound effects on indigenous civilization. It's a story of exploration, conquest, and a struggle to reconcile vastly different worlds. Let's dive into the complexities and misunderstanding that arose as Europeans and Indians came into closer contact. Again, you must put yourself into their shoes to grasp the depth of these cultural clashes. Both Europeans and Indians waged war, but their objectives were worlds apart. Europeans fought to settle matters on the battlefield, aiming to kill many enemies and claim victory. In contrast, Indians fought mostly to capture people, whether for sacrifice, as with the Aztecs, or to replace lost tribe members through adoption, like the Iroquois. To the Indians, massive deaths on the battlefield were a blasphemy, a terrible waste of life that could never appease the gods. The perception of atrocities also varied greatly. Europeans were horrified by the torture and ritual sacrifices of captives, while Indians were appalled by the European practice of slaughtering women and children. These stark differences highlighted the profound cultural gap between these two groups. Indian social organization differed fundamentally from that of Europeans. In European society, men owned almost all property, set the rules of inheritance, farmed the land, and performed nearly all public functions. In many Indian societies, especially those north of Mexico, descent was matrilineal, traced through the maternal line, and women owned nearly all movable property. European men felt incomplete unless they acquired authority over others, especially the members of their households. They expected social inferiors to obey superiors. Indian men, however, did not have these patriarchal ambitions. Chiefs governed more through persuasion, example, and gift-giving than through command. Women in semi-sedentary Indian cultures did the farming and often had a significant say in the decisions about war, although men made the final call. When Europeans tried to change warriors into farmers, Indian men protested that they were being turned into women. Europeans could only impose direct rule over fully sedentary people by building on the existing social hierarchy, division of labor, and system of tribute. Understanding these differences helps us appreciate the profound impact of European colonization on indigenous civilizations. It wasn't just a clash of armies, but a clash of worldviews, social structures, and values. Now we are going to explore the profound and multifaceted impact of European arrival in the Americas. Let's examine these topics in detail, and by the end you will see how interconnected and far-reaching these historical developments were. Before the arrival of Europeans, Native American societies were incredibly diverse and technologically advanced. Picture a continent not as an uncharted wilderness, but as a vibrant and densely populated region, rich with cultural and technological innovations. Native Americans were masters of several technologies. The bow and arrow, which they perfected over thousands of years, was a crucial tool for hunting and warfare. Pottery making and weaving were highly developed arts with intricate designs that served both functional and ceremonial purposes. Native Americans domesticated a wide variety of plants that are now staples in global diet. Corn, which originated in Mesoamerica, was a dietary staple that supported large populations. Potatoes, first cultivated in the Andes, became crucial in Europe, where they helped sustain rapid population growth. Beans, tomatoes, and peanuts were also domesticated, greatly impacting global cuisine and agriculture. Native American societies displayed remarkable skills in architecture and urban planning. In Mesoamerica, the Maya and Aztec constructed complex cities with advanced infrastructure, including intricate water systems and massive pyramids. Estimates suggest that in 1492, between 10 to 18 million people lived in North America alone, with an additional 25 million in central Mexico. This significant population density indicates that the Americas were far from empty. They were home to a rich tapestry of cultures and civilizations. Now we are going to talk about Columbian Exchange. The Columbian Exchange was a pivotal event that transformed agriculture and ecosystems on a global scale. The exchange introduced several key crops from the Americas to the other parts of the world. Maize, potatoes, sweet potatoes became essential food source in Europe, Africa, and Asia. For example, potatoes became a staple in Ireland and Russia, significantly improving food security and population growth. Other crops, like cassava, were adopted in Africa, where they became a crucial food source. European settlers brought with them a variety of crops and animals that altered agricultural practices in the Americas. Wheat and sugarcane became profitable staples, while European fruits and vegetables were integrated into American gardens. The introduction of horses revolutionized transportation and hunting for many Native American tribes, particularly on the Great Plains. The Columbian Exchange also had significant ecological impacts. Europeans introduced species such as rats and certain plants that altered native ecosystems. Conversely, American plants and animals, including tobacco and cotton, became integral to global agriculture and economies. The exchange of these organisms dramatically increased food production and transformed ecosystems worldwide. The introduction of European diseases to the Americas had a catastrophic effect on Native American populations, contributing significantly to their decline. Europeans brought several deadly diseases to the Americas, including smallpox, measles, and influenza. These diseases spread rapidly among Native American populations who had no previous exposure or immunity. Smallpox was a devastating disease that arrived in the Caribbean in 1518 and quickly spread through Mexico and South America. The high mortality rates had a profound impact on societies that were already grappling with European colonization. The death toll from diseases was immense. Estimates suggest that Native American population in North America may have decreased by as much as 90% by the mid-17th century. This decline was exacerbated by warfare, exploitation, and other factors. For instance, in Hispaniola, the population declined from about 300,000 to just 500 by 1548. Disease was compounded by exploitation. Native Americans were subjected to harsh conditions, forced labor, and violence, which further weakened their resistance to diseases. The Indian slave trade, particularly in the southeastern United States, contributed to violence and disruption, exacerbating the impact of epidemics. The arrival of Europeans had far-reaching consequences that reshaped the Americas and the world. It's essential to recognize that North America was not an empty frontier in 1492, but a continent with rich and diverse cultures. The interactions between Europeans and Native Americans were complex, involving both conflict and cooperation. The idea of a virgin continent waiting to be colonized is a misconception that overlooks the vibrant and densely populated societies that existed before European contact. Europeans often misunderstood the causes of Native American decline, attributing it to divine providence or interpreting it through their religious beliefs. This misinterpretation hindered a full understanding of the impacts of disease and exploitation. Native Americans, in turn, might have perceived devastating epidemics as a sign of divine abandonment or punishment. Despite severe impacts of European arrival, Native American societies demonstrated remarkable resilience. They adapted by incorporating European technologies such as firearms and horses, and by navigating the complex dynamics between competing European powers. Many Native American groups continued to maintain a significant presence and cultural identity well into the 19th century. In conclusion, the arrival of Europeans in the Americas triggered a series of interconnected events that reshaped the world. From the sophisticated achievements of Native American cultures to the devastating effects of disease and transformative Columbian exchange, these changes had profound and lasting impacts. By examining these historical developments, we gain a deeper understanding of the complex interactions that shaped the history of Americas and continue to influence global history today.